discover new oceans unless you have the courage to lose sight of the shore. Genius is making complex ideas seem simple. Education is the most powerful weapon to change the world. Today I had the great pleasure to sit down with Kaleb Rashad. Dr. Kaleb Rashad is a friend from High Tech High. He is a creative director and the co-founder now of centerforloveandjustice.org. This is a center that helps school leaders, especially of marginalized communities, to start their schools and start really implementing and enacting the structures to allow for transformation. He describes himself on his Twitter profile as designing school for collective liberation and also as walking with the ancestors. We were lucky enough to have Kaleb over here in Hong Kong to share a bit of his insights and do some tours to really see how Hong Kong is innovative and in creating some transformative learning experiences for students. So here we go, Dr. Kaleb Rashad. I hope you enjoy it. All right, hello everyone. I am talking with a good friend back from High Tech High. I'm over here in Hong Kong. He's over in San Diego. But we'll let him introduce himself, but just a bit of a background about Kaleb. And overall, all around, and I think I can say this because you use this word a lot, and I'll let Kaleb introduce himself a little bit more and expand upon those. But Kaleb, why don't you just quickly introduce yourself and what you do?
Well, first of all, let me just say, first of all, thank you for having me, brother. It's always a pleasure seeing you. And I remember the last time we were together in Hong Kong, maybe some things we shouldn't say live, but I look forward to seeing you again and connecting in person when we can. But first of all, let me just say that whole badass thing did not come from me. It's kind of pompous, like wow, kind of weird. But it was our school who had these sort of two mantras over at High Tech High. The original, it was to be excellent to each other. And that was our beyond all the stuff we have to write in reports about your mission and your vision. When we talked to each other, it was how do we be excellent to each other, and how do we do better? Now, nobody's gonna say Kaleb Rashad, Sir Excellency. So I said, well, if we're gonna be like the school, I get to be the director of that.
Okay, that's your title, director of. I should have specified that. I know Rob is the Emperor of Rigor, right? And there's all these great titles, kind of like you have in Star Wars. So is that your official title then?
No, that was my title when I was with the school, with High Tech High. And we had just some, you may know, but others the human beings that work in these places, they give, every teacher gives their heart and their soul, and there's this sort of electricity that they carry on their arms about their work and passion and living with joy and purpose and bringing that to school every day with young people and allowing young people to find their way in the world. And because this group was, about being excellent to each other and doing bad work, I felt when I left the school, really that title really kind of belongs to the school director. But it just kind of, stuck in some ways. So my formal title is the creative director of the Center for Love and Justice.
Great. So you mentioned too the kind of people that teach in this building, and the kind of passion that they exude, this whole idea of being excellent to each other. Having taught at High Tech High as well, I completely concur that those are the kind of people that are there. So tell us a little bit about, unpack the journey. How did you find High Tech High, and maybe from there, a little bit more about how you kind of moved to this whole, Center for Love and Justice, just a little about your story and pathway.
Yeah, I think maybe one of the interesting storylines is that, I had gotten 2 master's degrees, a doctorate in education, and it wasn't until I got my doctorate in education where there was really any substantive treatment about creativity, innovation, and equity in schools. And in the course of my doctoral studies, I ran across several bodies of work. For example, Tony Wagner's work, Creating Innovators and Change Leadership. Of course, Michael Fullen's work and all the work he did in Canada. But then there was this little place called High Tech High, featured in a couple of those publications. I was like, High Tech High, what is that? And so I said, wait a minute, that's like right here in our backyard. It's kind of weird because High Tech High is like this thing, but it's kind of mom and popish in a way, meaning like it's small. It's, you know, they don't like, you know, say a whole lot. They just kind of go about their business. And, but other people write about them a lot and about what they do. And I think that's a lot of Larry's influence. Larry Rosenstock, our former founder and CEO. So to me, I think one interesting piece is like, if you really want to like disrupt yourself, if you want to like learn from other people, you really do have to get out of your lane. You have to like search for people outside of your circles and break the patterns of like your social communication, your social circles, where you find information, and like bust those things up, because that's the only way you get like more inputs and seeing what is possible. And so, make a longer story a bit shorter, I was a principal of a small school called Mary McLeod Bethune Elementary in the hood in Moreno Valley, California. And I don't know, I feel like if all the rich kids get to like do this inquiry-based learning and get all this affirmation about how beautiful and sweet and genius they are, I'm like, wait a minute, what about the black and brown kids? What about the dirty, poor white kids? They all God's kids too? Anyway, so we started this journey to at Mary McLeod Bethune to redesign what learning looked like there. I got into year 3 of that project, and we made some pretty good progress, but I got stuck. I didn't know where to go, who to talk to about it. No one else in my circle knew what the hell I was talking about. I was talking about project-based learning, design-based learning, creative leadership. They're like, yeah, get out of here. Just follow the standards. So I cold called Larry Rosenstock. And I said, Larry, did you just pick up the phone?
The head of the organization, first call.
Yeah. And he's like, this is Larry. And I told him who I was, what I was working on, and said, hey, I'm curious about what you think I should try next. And that's how I got connected to High Tech High.
Wow. So Larry, picks up the phone. I'm curious where to go next. And then you fast forward a little bit, and your next, I guess position is, as were you initially then the creative director? You came in, or that kind of you built up to that?
No, Larry is very persuasive though. He's got that whole Italian thing, Jewish thing. He's like smooth and informed and all the things. And he's like an uncle to me, and I just love him to death. And so I was the principal in my own school outside of High Tech High. And then they asked me, the grad school, so High Tech High has a graduate school of education founded in 2007, said, hey, will you teach courses on creativity, innovation, and design? Yeah, I get to meet new people, right? I get to meet new people and like read stuff together and talk about it and take action. Yeah, sign me up. So I did that. And that's how I got like started at High Tech High and in the graduate school. And then eventually Larry called to say, hey, we might want you to like be the director of the original High Tech High.
Wow.
And I was like, no.
Why did you say no? Yeah. Tell me about it.
I don't know, man. Just like every teacher, I just felt like I was right in the middle of projects in my school, trying to turn around, like you build relationships that are real with people, with parent groups, with teachers, with funders and nonprofit organizations and civic organizations. And you ask them to trust you to like do a thing with the kids that's going to be somehow beneficial. And so like, it was just hard for me to like leave. those schools where I was. I mean, high tech, I was already badass. Like, what do you need me for? And so anyway, so he kept asking. I finally said yes. And frankly, I was intimidated because all the schools I had worked in before had, done projects, but not project-based learning. So of course, everyone always thinks they're already doing projects. So I had I don't know, I had a leg up on them in some ways. Those schools that I was working with. When you go to high tech high, they kind of OGs in this space.
What is the difference then? Yeah, doing projects and project-based learning. If you could
come on. Thank you for teeing me up. I know you know the answer to this too. But yeah, so I kind of like the way the old school Buck Institute used to talk about it. But essentially, I would just say that project-based learning is learning through the project. It is fully contextualized learning experiences. Is there direct instruction? Can direct instruction live in that? Of course it can. Can small groups work in that? Of course it can. Can you do expository writing? Can you do all the technical elements of any particular discipline? Of course you can. Learning through projects, i.e. project-based learning, is different than doing a project. Doing a project is what I used to do as a teacher with the Volcano Project. That's a good example, right? It is follow this recipe. And if you do this on that one day that we did it, or that 1 week that we did it, then we did a project. Real project-based learning, as you know, starts with a global, open-ended, non-Googleable sort of question. And provides avenues for young people to explore that question, generate their own questions, make sense of things, make something that reflects what they've learned, and then take action in some way. That's not what the Volcano Recipe Project is about.
Interesting. I like that you said recipe, right? I think people can really contextualize that, because I'm actually thinking too, maybe I'm not a cook or a chef, because all I do is I will Google a recipe and then I'll follow that. Well, my partner is more of a chef who kind of deviates and uses kind of the recipe as this, okay, this is the backbone, but yet completely comes up with these new recipes and having this urban garden that feeds into it. So is that maybe a kind of visual? You said the Volcano Project followed a recipe. So then what's your highlight reel? When you were okay, this is when I figured it out, and this was a project-based experience that I led. So the Volcano Project is a doing project. What's one that you want to talk about that was okay, this is.
Are you kidding? Are you gonna put me on fire like that, yo?
Yeah.
So many projects I love. Okay, when I was the director of the original High Tech High, it was my honor to work in service of those teachers. Underpaid, underappreciated, working their asses off, days, nights, and weekends, and incredibly talented people. Largely, some of them were professionals. They were lawyers before they became teachers. They were scientists and engineers before they became teachers. So they come with professional grade knowledge. And when they bring that into the classroom, it's poof, amazing. So what is one? I can probably go off a bunch of projects. So let me just give you one. And if any of my teachers are listening, please don't be mad at me if I didn't mention your project. But this one in particular is coming up for me right now. It's called Found Sound of the Underground.
Right there alone, that name.
Come on, right? It's fire. Let's see. I think that was a project done by Mike Strong. I think it was a 3-person project. Mike Strong. Gosh, who are the other two? Sorry, I'm blanking on names right now. Dennis Walker, and there's one other person. I think it was a 3-person project. Forgive me. Bounce Out of the Underground was dope. Essentially, all 3 of the teachers, and there's this sort of ethic at High Tech High, as teacher as designer. All of them had all of these albums from just living in the world and people who love to make music. So they brought albums to school every day, vinyl records, 45s, baby. And right, okay, yeah, okay, right.
I got my record player right there in the living room. I'm excited.
And here's what they did that was dope. The question was, explore music from the 1960s to today for themes of social justice. From Marvin Gaye to Kendrick Lamar. So every day kids came to school and listened to 45s. And they wrote down lyrics of evidence where they saw social justice themes. They wrote about it. So they did the expository, again, learning through projects. Big question, big idea. Let people explore that, right? The young people were exploring the music by listening to the music every single day and then capturing verbatim where they see evidence of social justice themes or where they could see an opportunity. And then they had to like write about it. They had to produce about it. They had to make their own music. They created like drums and it was just unbelievable. Then they put on a show to like share their music, share their learning about what they had heard from the 1960s, Marvin Gaye, to today. It was like 2017 when that project happened, I think, to Kendrick Lamar. It was amazing. And when you have such a project like that, oh my God, the diaspora of creative energy and talent comes out of young people, you're like, oh my God, why aren't more of us doing this? When you follow the recipe, you know exactly what you're going to get. It's already predetermined. It's prescribed. And if you want to know, like the number one element for the suppression of creative talent is prescription. When you open that question up, you can see the sort of beautiful biodiverse expression of creative talent.
Wow, that's big. That's huge. That I got goosebumps listening to that because I was like, I would want to be in that class for sure because I'm a musician.
Yeah, me
But
too. I couldn't sit in my office. That was my problem. I was a terrible director. Okay, first of all, let's just say that. Like every time I was around, like nobody's doing any work. I'm taking pictures. I'm talking to the kids. I can't help it.
They are doing work, and you're highlighting it. That's exactly what a director should do. You are less a manager, right? You're a leader and a coach. So, like in that project, are you a musician yourself, by the way?
I would not say a good one.
Okay.
When I was in the church choir, they took the microphone away and gave me drumsticks.
Oh, there you go. Nice. Hey, we share that in common too. So those kids though in those classes that aren't musicians necessarily, right? Someone might say be apprehensive and be like, okay, well, I know Mike Strong's a musician, and I don't know about Dennis, but I'm assuming probably has a music background. So for those kids who aren't like into music, and so for teachers who are like, well, I don't know because this project idea, how do I get everyone's interest, and passion? So how do those kids that aren't into music attach to this particular project, or is it bigger than the whole music? And did every student attach? And maybe you can talk about a particular example if you have it. If not, that's fine. In terms of the kids that came to this and how they got excited about it.
Yeah, great question. So let me answer it by talking about another project.
Sure.
So I love projects are dope. So John Santos had a project. It was a boat building project. And if you walk in the halls of High Tech High right now, you'll see that boat up in the rafters, curated from when they were just getting started building it. So it's disassembled to the actual final project, the final product, the 16-foot dinghy that they built. Is every kid a boat builder? No, of course not. And can I just say this just for like kicks and giggles? It was a biology class. Right. And I know. Okay.
You're like, wait, biology? It's got to be oceanography or something class. Wait, a biology class? How did that work in?
Right, exactly. This is what's like the genius of people. If you
Mm,
just open up a little bit, right?
mm,
Anyway, so of course, there's some principles that undergird all of it. Everything is connected in one way or the other. The kids would take the boats out to the bay and use the boats to like develop sort of a cartography of like the land beneath the ocean
mm.
and the wildlife and the ecosystems that exist there. Vital. Is every kid a boat builder? No, of course not. In the course of designing the project, John Santos is a genius with this work. A genius
Mm.
meaning like spend 10 years or 10,000 hours or more designing projects.
Mm.
Nobody gets to this point, by the way. I should probably say that. Because if you're like interested in like designing a project, you're like, oh my God, I need to build a boat. Or I need to do found sound of the underground. Don't do that.
Do your own thing, yeah.
Start small, fam. And then
Oh, okay.
right? Start small, and then you like, I can share some tips later. But in this boat building project, John Santos and Pat, blanking on Pat's last name right now, John and Pat had this boat building project. And there were, if I remember correctly, 3 teams on the boat building project. There were the builders of the boat, there were the documentarians, and then they had the research and business development group. And kids got a chance to opt in to where they wanted to be. So if you felt good with like working with your hands, you had a space to be like a boat builder. Literally, they strung every element of the boat together. It's just an incredible thing to see, and well crafted, by the way. Second group, there were documentarians. They're the people who were filming, writing, and sharing the whole experience from start to finish. And then the third group was like, okay, now that we got this boat built, how do we sell it, auction it off? How do we source the materials and goods built that the builders need, and then how do we dispense with it when we're done? That was their job. And so their exhibition was at the local marina, and they took this beautiful boat and took it in all of its parts into and invited sailors and boats people, whatever their names are, to like come and inspect the boat and talk about it and auction it off. So I say that to illustrate an answer, and that is when you're first starting to design projects, kids might have less voice in some elements of it. As you become more skillful in it, students will take more of a lead in like all the different sides of all the aspects of the project, and they will find a way to like contribute to it that makes them feel like they've got something to give.
Hey EduTransformer, I hope you're enjoying this interview with Kaleb. We've really heard a lot about how to infuse student passion, how to increase equity within a project, and how you can really connect subjects regardless if it's not your area of expertise. If you're interested in finding out how to improve as a practitioner of project-based experiences, we have a great scorecard over at transformschool.com/12, the number 12, shifts mastermind. And there you can find out specifically where you're doing well and where you have some area for growth. And finally, check out the YouTube channel, my YouTube channel, Kyle Wagner, and there's a great playlist there for school leaders if you're looking for some of those underlying structures in how to improve the opportunities for equity and PBL at your school. Now let's hear more about Kaleb, about how you can infuse some of those structures within your school to allow for these experiences.
Great. So I a lot of nuggets that you said really start small, for anyone listening to this. And we're talking about project, people put in 10,000 hours. So this is kind of like the mecca, but there's some important concepts in there. I mean, you had the boat, that was the driving force, but I almost like think of this title as being, hey, it's not about the boat, right? It's about really where kids can all plug in. They all had their own interest. And so, so you said Dennis, was this Dennis and Pat? You said, or no, not Dennis and Pat.
So
Pat
the
and
boat
John.
project was John and Pat.
Okay. And John was biology and Pat was, what was his subject?
Pat was humanities.
Okay,
But
great.
if you walked into his room, you couldn't tell.
That's good. That means you see how everything's connected. But yeah, bringing in those subject lenses, because you mentioned, some students are doing the writing or the documentation of the process. So let's dive in a little bit about, you can use this project as an example of it. But I know your work in equity is so large, and I think it's great that we got very kind of, granular into an actual project and seeing how different learners can plug in. But I want to kind of open it up again and give you the opportunity to talk about just in general, if it's project-based learning or, I know you have a framework that I saw on Twitter in terms of like where equity is going to come from, and just jam a little bit on how do you see these kind of opportunities, or where do you see schools being able to make the most strides when it comes to equity for students?
Yeah, that's a great question. So none of us are short on opinions. So I would love to maybe offer a couple things. One is the research base and the scholarly positioning of what equitable practices look like in school. So I'll start there.
Mm.
Secondly, I'll share my experience about where I see opportunities for equity relative to what the scholarly research says. And then I think I'll name some things of what could be possible to amplify equity work. So I'm gonna try to go in those kind of three stages. So stage one, in 2015, three researchers, Pedro Noguera, Linda Darling-Hammond, and Diane Friedlander, wrote a piece that I've used over and over and over again as deep, rich scholarship about the case for equity, and what it means, what are the policy implications, etc. They describe three things in the research. I think it's on page 5 or 6. And from their point of view, it is equity practiced in three ways. One is students doing work that is meaningful to them. In parentheses, it says that leads to students engaging in deeper learning. So I'll put a pin in deeper learning for now, and we can talk maybe a little bit about that, what that means. But one is students doing work that is meaningful to them. One. Two, it is delivered by caring and competent adults. Do you love kids? More importantly, do the kids believe that you care about them? Because if the kids don't believe that you care about them, it doesn't matter what you're trying to teach. You don't have to love them. It's helpful. But there is a piece of the scholarly research that talks about pedagogical caring. And students need to believe, whether true or not, that there's at least one adult that cares about them, that sees them, that knows them well, and that will look after them. So the third piece is that there are structures and supports in place for teachers to deliver learning that matters. So it's this this sort of triangulation between learning that matters at the top, I'm making this up, learning that matters to students at the top. One vertex is about delivered by caring, competent adults. And the third, there are the conditions. And then we could talk a whole lot about the conditions. The conditions and structures that support teachers in delivering learning that matters to young people, that engages them in deeper learning. So I just said a lot right there. And you know a lot of this stuff, and there may be some questions that you might want to surface, but that's one perspective. A very profound one, but a very good one. Secondly, from the experience level, like from my point of view in doing this work, my sister Sarah Fine over in our GSC wrote a piece some years ago that says that deeper learning, project-based learning has a race problem. And she's right, because most, particularly in the United States, um, that kind of learning that we just described, where kids are doing meaningful work with adults that care about them in an environment that is conducive to delivering that work, that is not typical in Black schools, not typical in brown schools, not typical in historically in indigenous schools or in past or present. So in Sarah Fine's article, she argues that it is Dewey that needs Frary more than Frary that needs Dewey. The Dewey is the sort of project-based learning, rich experiences, dialogue, right? That's overly simplified, but that's where that body of practice comes from, in part. The Freire model is about learning to read the world. You can have lots of scholarly academic information, but if you Black and you walk in Detroit and the police stops you, how are you reading that situation right there? Right? So the Freire model is to say, yo, it's not good enough just to like acquire academic information, skills, and dispositions. Those are important literacies. And another important literacy is the literacy of reading the world. And he proposed a certain way that you go about that. And that is through critical observations, dialogue, reflection, and democratic action.
All those,
so
all those things, sorry to interject there, but all those things you mentioned, you know, that you mentioned schools don't necessarily have, you know, that reflective type of practice, you know, that way of seeing the world. Like you mentioned scholarly, that three triangle, people come back, boom, we got it. We got caring adults, you know, meaningful learning experiences, but it's not about knowing that, right? It's about the transformation, you know, Dewey being the one who says, okay, here's how to do that constructivist learning. And people are like, okay, I got that skill set. But as you mentioned, you know, it's beyond that. It's more of a continuous dialogue, right? And reflection. So maybe we can talk about that. Like, how do you build that kind of like reflection in schools? Because you left the school you're at. I'm partly assuming it was hard. You mentioned how hard it was for you to come to High Tech High because you left that community. But I assume at some point, did it get to a point where that community that you're at had that, or do you feel like you would be better served by having a school that had more that was reflective structures, dialogue, you know, built in?
Yeah, that's a good question. I used to coach football, and as a football coach or any coach, you always coach the team that you've got. Coach them from where they've been, who they are right now, and who they could become, right? As a team. And every school I ever worked in had incredible people. They all loved kids. They all expressed it differently. But there was always a deep sense, I care about these kids. Unfortunately, most of our American institutions in schools in particular, they sit at the cross section of injustice, racial injustice in particular, from the funding of the schools to the recruitment, development, and growth of competent, caring teachers. And when it comes to learning in Black and brown and poor schools, it is largely militarized. It is, I do it, you do it, we do it. It is, you're gonna do what I tell you to do, and I'm gonna give you a gradual release. It's like you have to like prove that you're human, or one day you're gonna be human. And so here's stuff you might need sometime. They're human already. I think in the words of the great Dr. Lisa Delpit, 50% of the curriculum comes in the door when the students enter your classroom. Our model, this is kind of Freirean, is been about, it doesn't matter who you are coming into the room. I'm going to give you everything you need to know in order to make sure that you're somehow prepared for the future and you assimilate into a certain set of values that we somehow are gatekeepers of. And we get to say, who's in and who's out, by the way. So it's both person and system. And the system was not designed for progressive liberation. It was not designed. In fact, it was designed. You look at the early schools here in America. It was about saving the body of the savage, in quotes, and leaving their culture behind. All they wanted was your body, not anything that was about your history, your language, your culture, your identity. We don't give a care about that. We're here to commodify you. This is the part of capitalism that we need to critique more. We have that same sort of commodification in education. Anyway, so when it comes to how we do that, I think it's a recognition that teachers are trying to do the very best they can with the structures and conditions that they've been institutionalized to. Now, so for me, like, I felt like I was always in second gear, just trying to make, like, how about we listen to students? Oh, it's going to be a popularity contest. Oh my God. Listen to the young folks. Like that sounds so simple. I said that one time at an assembly. I said to the kids, whose school is this? They said, our school. I said, whose school is this? Our school, yeah. And parents come up to me and say, why did you say that to them? Teachers, why did you say that to them? We've got this addiction to control. There's a lot of other things, etc. So why did I leave? Sorry, I could give you a lot, but a shorter answer might be, I felt like I was constantly in second and third gear just to give any semblance of power and agency to kids. At High Tech High, there was already like this fourth, fifth gear. Like, oh yeah, we lead with the kids. Awesome. Now let's go deeper. How do we go deeper? Critical pedagogies, critical analysis, looking at the social, looking at how to read the world. You can be about equity and be completely colorblind and not know how to address issues of race and racism. We're not just talking about your personal feelings. That's elementary. The graduate, the Jim Crow Esquire, is about how racism exists in institutions and in systems and in policies and procedures and pedagogies.
Yeah, that's the big uncovering, is that it's systematic, right? You mentioned, I knew you would come back to it, about deeper learning, right? And I even saw you do it with your hands, and people who are just listening to this, just envision, Kaleb using his hands to show deep learning and really uncover those bigger, deeper questions. I want to potentially, end with this. You chatting a bit about now the work. You mentioned the conditions, the structures. Let's end with that. So you said you walked into High Tech High and it had it, and people go, I'm telling you, man, I remember talking to Larry about, hey, Larry, what kind of work you doing? He's like, oh, well, just have people come. We have like 10,000 visitors a year. So everyone's coming to High Tech High, right? And he even says, look, we don't want to be a model. We basically do what we do. But let's unpack that. How do you get to those conditions and structures? And what are you doing through like your Center of Love and Justice, just to shout out a little bit of that, to help schools, equip schools with those structures?
Oh, thank you for that lead. And in fact, we have an open invitation, a public call that goes for the next 10 days. It closes on March 18th, seeking partnerships for organized schools that are interested in, or communities that are interested in either starting new schools or redesigning their existing schools. That's what we do in both of those arms for the Center for Love and Justice. What are the conditions? So there are layers to this work, and I'll try to please pose the question if you've got it. But if we're talking about, if we're beginning with the end in mind, and we're thinking about what could learning look like for young people that is meaningful, delivered by people who care and are competent, and the structures and conditions to support the delivering of that work, that learning experience. If we want to do that in a way that is tuned for continuous improvement, that is tuned for adaptability and ownership, and tuned for progressive liberation, like you get increasingly more free, then there are some things that we know that are helpful. One is, if you're a person who has role position authority, you're a superintendent, a principal, a collection of teachers, could work. First thing you got to do is take a moral stand. There is something inherently valuable in the person who has the power to hire and fire, to chart the direction, to say, this, what we've been doing is not serving our kids' needs best. There is another direction. I don't know exactly how we're going to get there, but we got to move in that direction. And involving and activating people around the development of that vision together. So there's taking like a moral stance, developing a sense of urgency, and then activating the community to help build the vision. That's a lot of layers, but that's a thing. And then next, and maybe at the same time overlapping, there has to be an alignment of like people to the vision, an alignment of resources like schedules, times, calendars to the vision, and fiscal resources to the vision, and the alignment of instruction and assessment practices to the vision. You would imagine this doesn't happen quickly.
Yes, long time. It's not a quick hack.
This takes long-term sustained work. And the way we approach it is building off the great Peter Singe's work around learning organizations. And that is, one, to be clear about the mission objective, two, build the capacity of the group, and then three, develop meaningful, inclusive, and equitable practices. So we call it triple track. We have to attend to the triple track always. If you're depending upon us, our design means nothing. So one of the key elements to equity is power. Not the ability to like make decisions within a defined field of choices, but the author of the choices. That is the pinnacle of equity work. And the more folks that have access to collective power, collective authoring ability to decide what the choices are, that's what's cracking.
Wow. That's terrific. I can't even I try to paraphrase a little bit, but I would do it injustice. But the author of choices, that's something that's going to stick with me. Taking that moral stand together, building that vision together, and then doing that work, alignment of people, schedules, and everything else, because sometimes it's switched around.
I would say one other thing too, because there's always layers to this work. So let me add one more.
Sure.
One more layer is what I and my good sister Katie Martin describe as the 3 Ps, the 4 Ps. Let me name a couple of them. This is what the person who has role position authority does. After taking a moral stance, after activating people around the vision, after developing that compelling, in other words, you can't have like just some like, we want all kids to be civic minded in college and career. Come on, man. Nobody ain't following empty suits. You need to have some soul. You need to have some spirit. You need to have some mojo, some chutzpah. You need what do the Japanese call it? I'm blanking on it right now. But there is like that thing that is uniquely human that sometimes is inexpressible. The triumph of the human spirit. That is what you need to be able to speak to collectively or individually. But then after you do that, or while you're doing that, there are three things that you as a superintendent, a principal, even a collection of teachers might do. One is to give permission. Sounds simple. Public and private permission, and know your people are going to screw it up. That's part of it. That's part of it, yo. So one is to give people public and private permission when things go awry, because they will. One, increase your insurance policy. But two, have a reflective conversation to assure the person that they're probably going in the right direction and safeguard against serious, egregious errors and keep moving in the direction. Public permission and private permission matters. Number two, protection. You gotta protect your teachers, fam. If you want people, if you want people to take risk, innovation, creativity, applied imagination requires people to take a risk. How are you creating psychological safety for people to take risk? Is you give them public protection. You also have to protect teachers against themselves. So there's a nuance to this. Crabs in a barrel syndrome. You've got a group of teachers trying something. You might have another group of teachers like trying to tear them down. Your job is to protect them and protect the work. The other thing is when people's passions get turned on, you have to protect them from themselves. You say, nope, turn it off, go home, rest, be with your kid, because that matters, protection. Third is reduction of policies. Schools are wrapped with a wicked hairball of policies that were created some other time that we just inherit. And they're like all in your beard, they're all in your hair. It's just a hot mess. So you have to clear the path so that teachers can do the thing and move in that direction. And the last one is from Katie, and I really like it. Dr. Katie Martin. She suggests that we have to let go of perfectionism. The sense that it has to be right if you're going to do it. We would suggest progress over perfection.
Just to rehash in terms of those 4 Ps, I think they're quite memorable, with permission, protection, policies, and getting rid of that notion of perfectionism. Kaleb, thank you for everything you shared. I'm going to put all this in the notes in terms of like where to find out more about your work.
Come on, you're my homie, brother. Anytime you need me, I'm here. I can't wait till we can actually do some more work together in Hong Kong or wherever we might take us, man.
Great. Thanks so much, Kaleb.
All right, peace, brother.